Welcome back to Crooked Lantern. Today we're going to be going over how to fix a camp stove if it's not working, and how to find one, pick one out if you're at a yard sale or something and you need a stove and you kind of want something older. So first thing you're going to want to look at, let's say you're at a yard sale and you're walking around and you see one. You're going to want to just look at the overall integrity of the case. Is it rusted out? Is there holes? Is there major dents? You're going to find that most of these are going to be pretty messed up to a certain extent. This one has got something right there. I don't know. I could probably wipe it off. I've kind of wiped this one down. I haven't gotten too crazy with it. This is an older, early Canadian stove. So it's got kind of the old Coleman prevent forest fires sticker here. And if you look right here, I want to say this is the 4B. It also says right here, made in Canada. Been having some issues with this camera as far as focus. I want to make sure you guys can see this stuff today, so that looks like it's in focus. So made in Canada. There's actually some description on the bottom here, which is kind of cool. But it says WM.B. Bennett, and then it's got some address in Canada, and let's see, JASAWA something tree, Canada. Kind of cool. So the next thing you're going to want to look at, so you've got a stove in front of you and you're like, cool, it's got a handle works. It's either going to have these on the older ones, or on the newer ones it's going to have a latch right here. So if it's got the latch, you want to make sure that latch works, obviously. So once you've verified that the case is good, you're going to want to open it up, however that is, whether it's just sliding those off to the side, and you can kind of tuck them up underneath. Gives you a little bit of lift. Open her up, and you're going to want to look at a few things. So the first thing you're going to want to look for is the inside of the case. Is it burned up? A lot of times what you'll see is this is just completely just charred and burned and totally ruined. If you're okay with that, then that's fine. But me, I wanted one that was going to be somewhat decent. So the paint in here is actually not bad. There's still a lot of cleaning to be done on this stove if I want it to be clean. Unfortunately, it's just got a lot of grease that's sat, because I mean, what do you make when you go camping? You make bacon. So this is like 20-30-year-old bacon grease. So oven cleaner is just hardly making a dent. But that's something you can use to clean these. You just spray some oven cleaner on there. You keep an eye on it because it can strip the paint. But generally, if it's original paint, it's not really gonna strip it. So you want to check, make sure you got flaps. You're gonna need them for a windy day. You're gonna want to check the hinges for the flaps. Make sure those are good. You're gonna want the grate. And I mean, oftentimes these stoves are $5-10. You don't want to spend $5-10 on something that you're gonna have to go on eBay and find a grate for. So make sure it's got everything. You're gonna need a grate. You're gonna have 2 burners or 3 burners, and you're gonna want to make sure that those burners have everything. And I'll try to get some. I'll give you guys a little bit more of a overview of it when we get deeper into it. And then you're gonna have some sort of armature, either on the flap itself or on the stove. And what that's for is wind. So you kind of adjust that so when you're out cooking, you can move it out for the pot size. You can bring it in if you have a smaller pot, and that keeps the wind from blowing on your burner. So you're going to want to make sure that you have these little armatures, whether they're, like I said, integral to the case or the flap. And they're going to be one or the other. So we've got, on the stove, we've got both of those. and they rotate, so that's a good sign. Next thing you're going to want to look for is the tank. So, well, the tank's a little bit more in depth, so obviously you want to make sure you got the tank, and usually there's like a notch on this side, and the tip of the generator slips out, and then you can just kind of remove it. A lot of people didn't know how to put this in the damn thing, so they would just throw it in the truck or whatever. These would get all banged up and lost eventually, and that's why you find a lot of these without a tank. This is an older style tank, but I will show you the differences between the older and the newer. There's really not much. Oops. So, and this one's round, so it rolls around. So the next thing you're going to want to look for is you're going to look at your actual burners. So you've got two burners, the tube that receives the gas from the tank, shoots it down into a tube, and then it comes up into these burners, and that's where your flame will be. So you want to make sure that you have all that. So it's going to be like a J tube. It's going to be two burners, and they should look normal. They should look like something you would see at your stove at home. There shouldn't be anything weird going on there. And then on the left side, there's going to be like a little key, and what that does is that allows you to open it up so that you can use the second burner. So it should be captured, so when you get to that full extension it'll get a little snug. That's good. Don't go any more than that. It's captured for a reason so that you don't unscrew it all the way. So then when you're done using this burner, you want to go back to this burner. You can just twist it close. So you want to make sure, and then usually these ones will kind of slide in and tuck in there so that it stows away. There's different versions of that, but essentially it's the same concept. Just make sure that you have it there, because that's one of those things, you know, if it's not there for whatever reason, now you're on eBay or you're looking for that part somewhere, you know, and it's going to cost you more than probably you paid for the stove. So once you've made sure that the case and the burners are all good, now you want to look at the tank. So tank's either going to look like this if you got an older one, or like this if you got a newer one. So we'll get into some of the intricacies, but I'm gonna start with this guy. So first thing first, on one side you're gonna have a pump. So you can try to pressurize that pump 9 times out of 10. Well, let's say probably half the time it's gonna work, half the time it's not gonna work. This one, the leather is just not catching the side, so it's not pressurizing at all. But this pump is actually in pretty good shape. The nickel is actually pretty shiny. So I just got to take this C-clip off and flip the leather around or put a new cup in there. I'll show you how we're going to do that later. So you just want to check to at least make sure that's there. Make sure it's got a tube, obviously, and that it moves up and down. That's a good sign that it actually is free. Next thing, you're going to want to look at the knob. Go ahead and unscrew it all the way. These could have fuel in them, and they might be pressurized, so be careful when you're doing the testing. You don't want to be shooting fuel all over somebody's driveway if you're at a yard sale or in the thrift store. So make sure that that unscrews and screws back in. Next thing you're going to want to look at is this little armature. It actuates the tip cleaner for the generator. It should be snug. Not too loose, not too tight, but either way it is fixable if it's too loose or if it is too tight. Just at least make sure it's there. We'll go over some more stuff with that later. You don't need to have the generator, but obviously if you want to light the thing, it's going to help. So there's a generator. We're going to take that apart later and make sure it's usable. And then on the other side there's going to be a cap. So make sure you've got all those things, and you've at least got a tank that you can start with, and if it's not working, you can get it to work, because really this is where all the fire comes from. This is just what contains it. These are a lot more simple than lanterns. So now that we've gone over this one, let's go ahead and go over this one. As you can see, it's pretty much similar. It's got the tabs on the back. I forgot to mention that. Make sure there's some tabs because those slide into the case. Holds it in place. Make sure it's the right tank because those tabs do kind of vary. This tank is absolutely not proper for this. Not even close. This is, I think, for like a 3-burner. So if this tank was with this, I mean, you could probably sell it, but it's not going to be good at all for this. But essentially, you have the same thing. This one doesn't have the pump because I took it out. But you have a knob, you have a lever, you have a cap. There's no holes. It's a little worn. That's really normal with these. And we got a generator. Probably if I put fuel in here and a pump, I could probably get it to spit some fuel out, but that's really all you're looking for. So once you've verified all those things, you can go ahead and buy that stove, and I will show you how to get it running. So aside from the case, this is pretty much the most important part. The most you can really do with the case is clean it. So this is kind of the thing that you want to worry about when it comes to fire, be it accidental, having the fire go to the right place, which is obviously the burners. So the first thing we can kind of start with is the cap. The reason being, if there's fuel in it, you're probably going to want to get rid of that fuel. So I have a tank in my garage, or a little can, and that's got old bad fuel in it. I just kind of store it in there. And then throw it in a smudge pot if my friends are using one or something. But what you're going to want to do, empty that fuel if it's in there, and then find your cap and go ahead and remove it. This one, just due to the shape of the fount, there's still some fuel in it. I just can't get it out. So when I fill it up with fresh fuel, it'll just kind of have to burn out. You're going to want to look on the inside of the cap, and I can already tell you that the rubber on the inside of this cap is roached. And I'll see if I can get that to focus in here. I'll have to work with this camera some more, but unfortunately it's just not working. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to remove that rubber. So you're going to want to put it back on the fount, and you're going to want to tighten it down really tight. So just finger tight. Don't ever put a wrench on here unless you absolutely have to. And if you absolutely have to, pat it with a shop towel or some electrical tape or something so you don't mess up the knurling. Then you're going to want to take that, if you've got the 2-piece cap, or 3-piece rather, you're going to have a screw on top. If you have a single-piece cap, it's just going to be flat. If the rubber's bad, I recommend just getting a new one. You can pry out the old rubber and put new rubber in. It's just a bit more of a pain. So if you tighten that down enough, when you remove this screw, it's just going to come right out, and the cap itself is not going to move. So we've got the little flathead screw removed, and the cap's still in place. Now, remove the cap, and that just falls right out. So you have the 3 pieces. You have your screw, your cap, and then the inner portion. The inner portion is going to have a flat side, and it's going to have a ridged side with the rubber seated in it. There is some debate, at least in my opinion, as to what the proper replacement for this rubber would be. I generally use O-rings. Some people will say that's not proper. They're not fuel rated, which well, a lot of them are. You can specify that at the hardware store or automotive store. Technically, no, they're not proper. It's supposed to be like a flat piece of rubber. And I'll show you the differences here. And again, we'll see if we can get this camera to focus. Should be in focus. Right there. Boom. So as you can see, One is flat and one is round. So, O-ring, flat rubber. And I have had a lot more luck with the O-rings, personally. I do have a bunch of the proper ones that are actually sold as replacement cap gaskets. But like I said, I just don't have luck with them. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape all of this rubber out with a little pick tool, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to install that rubber. So if you have the flat cap gasket, it's going to fight you the whole way, and it's not going to want to go on there. Try to get this to focus. But eventually you can kind of get it to seat on there. You can kind of lay it flat on your workbench and push this down. The old rubber in this brass piece, it really rots on there, so you have to use a pick tool to really scrape at it. If you really can't get the flat the flat gasket to work, O-rings work just fine. So I've got mine on there. It still kind of wants to come off, but once you tighten it down and you leave it there for a while, it kind of settles into its home. The other issue that I've had with these flat gaskets is it makes it so that the cap doesn't want to tighten down all the way. So anyway, you just put that brass piece back in, and I just kind of finger tight with the flat head screw, and then so you kind of have to push to start the threads, and really you're going to want to go tight with that new gasket, and I would leave that there for a little while, as long as you reasonably can. And when you take it off to put fuel in it, when you're done rebuilding this tank, it'll be something that may or may not stay in its place, because it's really just press fit, and there's not a lot in there to keep it in place. It just kind of over time it just compresses and it just wants to stay there, so until it rots away. So we've got that in there, and now I know this is not going to leak. So that's important. And you don't really want to go super tight with this flathead, just snug, because if you strip that, your cap is now ruined. So you don't want to do that. So the other thing you want to do is there is a pump on the other side. It's either going to have screws or a C-clip. More likely than not, it's going to have a C-clip. You just take some pliers and you get under one side of it, and you just kind of pry it out, and as you can see, it just kind of swivels out. So it's just like that. Then the whole pump will come out. Now check this out. So let's see, is this rubber or is this leather? Okay, it is leather. Look at that. I barely, look, it's just, this leather is done. You cannot reuse this at all, and it's no wonder that it's ruined. So I kind of hate this design right here. So as you can see, this square washer, and I want to make sure you guys see this, is kind of a tricky part if you don't know what you're doing. Focus. Let's see, about right here. Okay. If anybody knows how to work these Canon cameras, you can drop me a line, because I can't find a setting that wants to focus. So let's see here. Boom. So see how there's a square? You're not going to find a socket that works with this. Maybe if I stand in front of it. You're not going to find a socket that works with this guy. So the way to get it off and I'll try to... You're going to want to go over to a vise or something like that. And take some paper towel, put it on the other end of the pump, and go snug. Don't over tighten it. Then take a pliers and get them on the flat ends, and you should be able to loosen that. That's what I have found to work. Just be careful not to damage. Boom. Okay, so we've loosened this square. Go ahead and remove that by just turning it counterclockwise. Got all these leather parts that are just total garbage. Let's toss those. Go ahead and wipe this down. Just make sure this is nice and clean, because you know this has got two washers, so basically you have this circular one right here, and you've got the circular one right here, and you've got the square that goes down over it. So while I was trying to figure out how to get the camera to focus, it may have cut out. If it did, then this is me saying sorry for that, and kind of re-going over. If not, then I suppose you didn't miss anything, so we're good to go. What we'll be doing is putting a new leather cup on this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one out of my toolbox, and we'll get that installed. So I bought these on eBay a while back, and they're actually really nice. Somebody knew the diameter, and they cut these little cups from some leather, like actual leather, and put some oil on it, and pretty much ready to go. So go ahead and take that, and then you take your square, place that down on the threads, and go ahead and turn that clockwise, and then take a little, be careful on this part because you could damage your leather, and if it's brand new leather, you don't want to do that. So you just kind of snug it just a little bit. There we go. You could even take a wrench if you found the right size. Doesn't need to be that tight. It really doesn't. Some people wrench those down. It needs to be tight enough, but it certainly doesn't need to be ridiculously tight. So now you've got your pump. It's clean. If you need to hit any of it with some steel wool, now would be the time. So you can go ahead and reinstall it. The one thing you want to mind is the oil fill hole, which I don't even know who uses those. You want to make sure that's in the up position. And the reason I say that is because I just take mine out and re-oil them if they need it. The one other thing you could check while you're in here, I suppose we could go over real quick. Take your pliers, and there's a squared off bar. Turn that counterclockwise. And this is what your pump actually slides down on. So this is what I'm going to clean up with some steel wool real quick. And I'm going to do this out of the camera frame so that I don't get steel wool all over my workbench. Your pump slides on this brass bar, And it also screws down into the check valve. The check valve is what regulates air going into the tank but not coming out. So it only took a very quick second, a little bit of steel wool, and it just cleaned up this bar. So you can see, I think I've got a setting that will allow me to focus a little better. It's nice and clean. So go ahead and find that thread, and you can look down in there. See if it's dirty at all. Mine's a little dirty. So I'll take a little brake cleaner, because what is brake cleaner not good for? Pretty much can use that for anything and everything. Just kind of swirl it around in there and dump it out somewhere safely, like in a garbage can, because it's going to evaporate. So now, you can take a paper towel, since you've probably loosened up a little bit of gunk in there with that brake clean, and you can kind of just shove that in there. And now we've got a really nice, clean looking air tube. So take that down, start it with just finger threading that in clockwise into that check valve in the bottom of the tube. Take your pliers, make sure there's no gunk on them, since you're going to stick it back down in that tube you just cleaned. Don't give it a lot, just a tiny. Don't want that to strip out. That's a bad day. So take your pump and just kind of, that new leather is going to be really tight against the walls of that tube, and that's good. But it's also going to make it a little bit more difficult to get everything lined up, because those brass square valves, they never sit perfect. They're always off just a hair from center, which makes it a little bit difficult when you're installing a new leather cup, because the leather cup is going to be perfectly centered. There we go. Oh, still fighting me. Come on. This is fighting me more than normal. Pressure's on. There we go. Okay. So now we take your little cap. You want the oil hole to be towards the top of where it would be sitting. So in this particular case, it doesn't matter, because it'll be above where it needs to be either way. So put your C-clip back on, you just slide it back on. That holds it from coming out. Now to test it, quarter turn out or so, cover the hole with your thumb, get some pops. Feels like it's got some resistance. Let's open the... I hear air coming out. Let's see if you can hear that at all. So that means there is now pressure in the tank. So I'm going to let that pressure out through the cap. Alright, see, my flat gasket stayed in place, but it's that's another thing that you want to check for when you pressurize it. You don't want to hear air coming from here. That's also bad. So cool. So we've addressed two things. We've got the cap, we got the pump. So now you're going to want to look at your knob. Is there graphite on it? How dirty is it? Mine does have a little bit of graphite on it, but I can't justify taking it apart at this point in time. So what I'm going to do is just wipe it down. and if it does start leaking, I'll keep an eye on it. I don't suppose it will, but it might. So now I'm going to take a little steel wool and start cleaning up this brass just a little bit since we're here. I want it to look half decent. And I highly recommend using compressed air or a throw-down shop rag that you don't use for anything else to get all these little pieces off, because what'll happen is they magnetize and they stick to all your tools all over your workbench. It's just a pain in the ass. So, alright. Wipe it down off the workbench, and then make sure you wipe off your workbench, because I'm telling you, those steel wool shavings, they stick to all your tools and they just get all over everything. So kind of cool. Looks like we're already getting some fuel out of the end here. So probably gonna work, but we don't know that for sure yet. So the next thing we're gonna check is we're gonna check the generator, and I'll show you how to do that. Sometimes there will be some thread over here that you can get onto, but generally you come onto this side, and once you have the right size wrench, counterclockwise, go ahead and remove this. This would be a good item to clean up with some steel wool if you have the time. You have a little tip that's going to funnel. They don't all have this little guy right here. This is a bit more specific to some of these older generators. So there's this goes into here, and some of those newer generators that'll just kind of be built in, but this is that small orifice where the fuel comes out. And then you can see the tip and the spring. These springs are similar to like what they would use on like a kerosene lantern. On a kerosene lantern they have these springs, and you're just going to want to look to make sure it's not all gunked up. So I don't know if you can see that. Just make sure it's clean. So now that tip's kind of sitting off center. So when you put this back in, you want to make sure you capture that tip cleaner right in the center. And double check. Okay, I think we're good. And then take your orifice and your tip. And I'll grab the newer one here in a sec, and I'll show you the difference. So, boom. Alright, and just give that a little snug. Not much, not even I think it was about 1/8 of a turn. So, I think we're all good here. We can probably go ahead and fill this up with some fresh fuel and test it. But before we do that, I'll show you on the newer style founts, that generator area. So everything else is the same. This is a little different. So, like I said, I'm fairly certain that this is for a 3-burner. See, there's some of that steel wool from just magnetizes and sticks to everything. It's a nightmare. Okay, so this one is unthreading from there. There's your tip, and then there's a spring in there. Doesn't really want to come out, so take a pick tool. Might have to put this in a vise to remove this, which wouldn't be a bad idea. But this is like what you would take some steel wool to. It is just nasty. See, y'all hear that? There's like a buildup on there that is just gnarly. And I don't even know if this would run, I might have to get a new generator completely, because that's... Oh, no, I could probably... This would take a little elbow grease right here, but we would clean this off. And then put this in a vise, remove this, make sure the inside of this tube is clean, that spring is clean, and then polish off the tip here and the little small orifice in there. We're not going to get into all that, just because this is not the one I'm trying to get to work. But if you are working on this style, that's what you would need to do. It's fairly straightforward, but it looks like... Alright, I'll show you. We're already here. You're already here watching. Like and subscribe, please. I want to keep making these. If nobody's watching, I can't justify making them. So, there's that tip. And, oh my god, it is nasty in that tube. So I would probably soak this in some kind of brake cleaner, because this orifice that we saw earlier is just totally stuck in here. You can kind of move it around from the bottom, but you can see that it is just totally gunked up. The inside of this tube is totally gunked up. So I would have this removed, and then I would take something, get this removed again, or I would, yeah, just get this whole assembly removed, get this off, get the spring out, this tip, clean it off, then put it all back together. This stove would run like hell if we tried to light this one up. It would just run terrible. This may be a good candidate for a new generator. Honestly, that's the easiest way to go. You can find these generators on eBay. You can also find them on... I'll show you in one moment when I'm done making noise. This website right here. Make sure that focuses. Boom. Old Coleman parts. They'll have the generator for this. The way to find out which generator it's supposed to be is you have to find out what model stove it goes to, and unfortunately if you just have the fount, you may not know. And you can measure it and you can post up on the forum. Maybe somebody can give you the right part number. Unfortunately, there is no markings on here, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if you brought this to me what generator number, part number this is. That's something that is going to be on the stove, unfortunately. So just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to put some fuel in this and get the stove, and we'll see if we can light it up. So I've got some fuel on here. We're going to go ahead and get it pressurized and get it installed in the case and get it lit up. So when you put fuel in these, it's very easy to put too much. You want to leave room for air. So when you tilt it on its side to fill it up, you really only want to fill it up to about here, because when you level it back out, you want it to be about right here. You don't want it to be all the way up. You want some room for air, for pressure. You can add pressure to it being completely full, but it's not going to run as long. So I try to just keep them about halfway. You don't really want it to be much higher than that. So keep that in mind when you're putting fuel on it. I pressurize it outside of it because it's a lot easier. So you can grab it however you need to. And oh, well, guess make sure the knob is closed so you don't start spraying fuel all over the floor. And everywhere else. So let's start adding pressure. I'm going to do about 25. Let's go about 30. Okay. So there are some instructions. It says lever must be turned up to light. So up position on this lever to light it. After 1 minute, turn down to burn. So after about a minute of this generator tube heating up, which I'll show you, we're going to go ahead and turn that tube down. Important, never use ethyl or doped gasoline, which basically is everything we have now. So always use camp fuel. So the way to install this, there's a hole in the front. I flip the handle up just to make it sit more flush. It's going to go into the little J, what do you call it? J tube, housing, what do you call it? So now we've got it installed. We got the tip up. We've got this little key. We've got it closed, so we're on this burner only. We want to start with just one burner. The reason for that is you want the generator to heat up, and that's where that crosses over. So I want to make sure you guys get a good angle on this. So I'm going to go ahead and change camera angles, and we'll resume. Alright, so I think that's a better camera angle, so you guys can actually see what's going on in here. So we're going to go ahead and open the tube, and we're going to see what we hear. Well, we're going to hear what we hear. So go ahead and just listen. You can hear fuel running into this, but mostly just gas, not quite fuel. What we want is fuel. So I'm going to open it a quarter turn. I'm going to turn this tip around a few times, and I'm going to close it. And I'm going to light whatever we got in this area, which really isn't anything. So that's good. We don't want fuel spewing out into the bottom, which is something else that you find is a potential. You'll see stoves that have had that happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to preheat this tube a little bit. That's the generator tube. We're giving it some heat. Now I'm going to open that back up. And we're starting to get some fuel through, but not enough. I'm going to close it. I'm going to go ahead and turn this out a little. I want more fuel. Oh, okay, so this generator's, there we go. So just had to open the knob up a little bit more. So I'm going to go tip up. Okay. Starting to level out a little bit. I'm going to let that run for a minute. Go ahead and open this up a little bit more. Watch for leaks over on this side. I don't see any leaks, that's good. Now, I'm going to go tip down. I don't know if it was ready for that yet. So we're going to go back to tip up. I'm going to open another turn. And I'm going to go all the way. So I'm not hearing any more change in the fuel amount. So once you kind of get to that point, you might as well open it all the way up. Go a quarter turn back. Now I can hear it's kind of starting to level out. I want to look over here, and I want to make sure there's no flames on this side by this J-arm. There's going to be a little bit right here, but there shouldn't be a lot. And then there shouldn't be anything under here. If you got anything under there, turn it off, put the fire out immediately, stop, because you've got a fuel leak in this tube, you're going to need a new one. This should be sealed. There should be no fuel coming out over here anywhere. It should all be right here. So now I'm going to go down with that little arm. It should start to clean up and turn into a small blue flame. Don't put a pot on this, you're going to get a bunch of soot on the bottom. So right now you should have like nothing on it. I'm going to turn this tip cleaner around a couple times. It should be leveled out by now, but it seems to be. I'm going to dial back on the knob a little bit here. Okay, I'm going to go full bore again. So this generator is not warming up as it should, but it has been, who knows, 10, 20, maybe 30 years since this stove is ran, and I'm betting that that generator is probably that old. So let's let this burn for a minute and see if it cleans up. If you watched my US military stove video, you'll see it was kind of that same scenario. It really wasn't wanting to work right, and finally it did clean itself up and turn into that nice little blue flame that we want. So let's just let this burn, and you can see right here all that black soot. That's bad. That means you're not getting a clean burning flame, and if you had a pot on top of this right now, it would be totally just covered in soot. I'm going to try something. I'm going to see if we can get this guy lit up, and maybe that'll help. Maybe it won't. So, haha! Alright. So, that seems to have helped quite a bit there. Interesting. So we're getting nice clean blue flame over here, getting a little yellow on the top over here. So I'm going to back off with that key, getting a low flame. Not really hot and right there. So this generator might need to be replaced. Maybe not, but now we've got a good enough flame to cook on. You could cook on this, you could put your pot on it, you're not going to get any messy soot on it. This particular stove, with the way that the generator is, seems to burn better on 2 burners and not just the one. But you could cook with this, but I would recommend replacing the generator. Being that this is an older stove, the generator is going to be harder to find. And I could go back through it again, and it's very possible that if I remove this tube from this, that I could clean the entirety of the tip, and there might be a little gunk in the middle like there was on that other one, and that could be what was causing that. So I'm going to shut off this burner, so I've got that key closed all the way. And slide that in. Now we've back to flame over here. So I'm going to turn it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this off completely. You're going to have a little bit of flames burning in the bottom. It'll be burning itself out. A couple things to note while we wait for this to burn out. We've got this shut all the way. You want to check your cap, make sure you've got no leaks. No leaks, no leaks. Think about a scenario where you don't set this into the case all the way, and you've got it hanging off, it's a little hot, the side of a, picnic bench at a campground. If this slides out while it's burning, while there's fuel coming out of the end of this tube, what's going to happen is it's going to slide across that flame, so there's going to be fire coming out of the end of this generator tube as it's falling to the ground. and it's going to be shooting out fire. It might go out, it might not. Something to keep in mind. So when you put this fountain in, make sure it's seated all the way, really snug. And make sure it's out all the way, because I've been talking and I can still see flame in here. It's still burning out fumes in that tube, and this generator's still spitting out some stuff. So it's going to take a minute. And you know, turn that tip cleaner around a couple times. Make sure you get all that out of there. You don't want to be lighting any fires, right? Prevent forest fires. I hope that's helpful. I hope that I covered everything. If you want, I can do a newer stove. They essentially are the same, but I have no problem doing that. So if you want me to do a newer stove, drop a comment below. I'll grab one of my other 425s, and I'll do basically a quicker overview with that one. If that's something that you guys want, let me know. Like, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.